Imagine this for a second. A nation gets hit hard. A real bolt from the blue surprise attack. Now, its whole defense idea, this promise of no first use, that they'll never strike first with nukes, it completely depends on being able to hit back, no matter what.
Right, the guaranteed retaliation.
Exactly. But what if the places where those retaliatory weapons are kept, the fixed missile silos everyone knows about, what if they're taken out in that first attack?
Well, that's been the nightmare scenario for strategists forever, hasn't it? If your opponent thinks they can wipe out your land-based missiles before you can react, your whole no first use policy just evaporates. It becomes just words, no real military backing.
That was the Achilles heel. But then, September 24th, 2025 happened. A test, kept very quiet, of this rail-mobile Agni Prime missile. And that test, well, it changed the whole game. It basically signaled that India is leveraging its huge civilian rail network, what is it, 70,000 kilometers,
Doubt that, yeah, one of the world's biggest.
and turning it into a core strategic military asset hiding in plain sight almost.
Yeah, you could think of it like a strategic upgrade disguised as just another freight train. And that's really what we're diving into today. We're looking at why the sources are calling this specific development a doctrine enabler. It's not just a new weapon. It fundamentally shifts India's no first use stance from, let's say, an aspiration to something genuinely verifiable, much more secure. It bolsters that crucial second strike capability.
Okay, let's lay the groundwork first. For you listening, if maybe you're not deep into nuclear strategy, India's whole approach is built on credible minimum deterrence, and that no first use promise is central. So, why is the survival of the launch system itself so incredibly vital for that credibility?
Because credibility is survivability, fundamentally. If you say you won't strike first, you absolutely have to convince any potential adversary that your weapons will survive their first strike. The whole deterrence idea rests on that guarantee absorb the hit and still be able to deliver unacceptable damage in return. If the other side thinks they can take out your arsenal in one go, deterrence just fails completely.
And that failure point, that vulnerability, that's the fixed silo issue you mentioned. Even the super hardened ones are becoming, well, obsolete.
Increasingly so, yes. Fixed land-based sites are just too easy to target now. With modern guidance, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, they're just incredibly accurate. It almost doesn't matter how much concrete you pour, a precise enough hit, a counterforce strike is going to neutralize it. And that vulnerability, it puts leaders under immense psychological pressure in a crisis.
Yeah, that sounds like that dangerous situation analysts call the use it or lose it dilemma. You feel you have to launch now or risk losing everything.
That's exactly the dilemma. If leaders fear their retaliatory force is about to be destroyed, the temptation is to launch on warning, even if the warning is ambiguous or maybe even false. That just ramps up the risk of accidental war massively. The Rail-Based Mobile Launcher, the RBML, it's designed specifically to counter that survivability problem. It gives leaders back time, stability, space for rational thought.
Okay, right. So let's unpack the actual solution then. Mobility is obviously key, but that's only part of it, isn't it? The sources really stress that the genius here is combining that mobility with near-instant launch readiness. So what's the tech leap that lets it hide and fire almost instantly?
Well, first you got to look at the missile itself, the Agni Prime, or Agni-P. This isn't some old missile stuck on a train. It's a next-gen IRBM intermediate-range ballistic missile. 2 stages, solid fuel, and a range of somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 kilometers. Designed for this kind of role.
And that solid fuel, that's a big deal compared to older liquid-fueled rockets, right? Less prep time.
Oh, huge difference for readiness. Solid fuel is stable. You can store it ready to go for years. Liquid fuels are often hazardous, corrosive, and you usually have to fuel the missile right before launch. That takes time, hours sometimes, and it's very visible activity. So solid fuel means it's basically ready the moment it needs to be. Plus, the guidance is state-of-the-art.
Right. I saw all the acronyms in the sources. RLGINS, MINS, NAVIC. Sounds complicated. In simple terms, what does all that redundancy mean for hitting the target?
Basically, it means it's incredibly accurate and reliable. You've got the main inertial navigation, the RLG-INS, but also a tiny backup system, MINS. And crucially, it can get updates from India's own NavIC satellite system, or GPS if needed. It's like having multiple independent, very precise guidance systems working together. Less chance of failure, much better accuracy.
And it can maneuver on the way down, too. The MARVs.
That's right, maneuverable reentry vehicles. Think of them as small thrusters on the warhead itself. As it's coming down, it can make adjustments, sort of zigzagging. This makes it much harder for enemy missile defenses to intercept. Even if they have defenses, the MARVs give the warhead a much better chance of getting through.
Okay, so that's the missile. Now, the instant readiness part, canisterization. Why is sealing it in a tube such a game changer for launch time?
Because it streamlines everything. The missile sits inside this hermetically sealed, climate-controlled canister, fully assembled, warhead attached, ready to fire. It eliminates all those pre-launch steps you used to need, lifting the missile, mating the warhead, extensive system checks, stuff that took time and specialized crews. Now, the reaction time shrinks from potentially hours down to just minutes.
And it's a stealthy launch too, right? This cold launch idea, how does that work?
Yeah. Instead of the main rocket motor lighting up inside the canister, which creates a massive heat signature and flash visible to satellites, a gas generator essentially pops the missile out of the tube first, up into the air.
It's cork from a bottle.
Sort of, yeah. Then, only when it's at a safe altitude, the main engine ignites. This really minimizes the launch signature, makes it much, much harder for enemy sensors to immediately detect exactly where the launch came from.
So you've got this super ready, stealthily launched missile, and you combine it with the ultimate stealth platform, the train itself, the rail-based mobile launcher, RBML.
Exactly. And the validation of the RBML is arguably the most strategically important part of that 2025 test. This launcher isn't just a missile on a flat car. It's designed to look like any other freight wagon and travel anywhere on India's national rail network without any preconditions. It just blends in. That camouflage spread across, 70,000 kilometers of track makes finding it incredibly difficult.
It's not just hiding, it's a whole mobile launch base.
That's right. It's self-contained, it has its own power, its own defensive systems, and critically secure encrypted communications to stay linked with the command authority. This lets it operate from unpredictable spots deep inside the country, turning the entire railway network into one giant shifting launch zone.
So summing that up, this breakthrough is really the integration of that immediate launch readiness from the canister with the profound stealth offered by this vast rail network. It takes the land-based deterrent from being a somewhat vulnerable fixed target to something highly resilient, constantly moving. Instead of watching a few known spots, an adversary now has to somehow track potentially thousands of trains across this massive country.
Precisely. It makes a disarming first strike almost impossibly difficult. The targeting challenge just explodes exponentially.
Okay, before we get deeper into what this means for India's neighbors, let's just pause for a moment. Are you preparing for competitive exams? Here's your chance to test your knowledge. Take part in our quiz on this topic and see where you stand. It's a great way to revise, practice, and boost your confidence. The quiz link is available in the comments section as well as in the description below. Don't miss it. Give it a try now. All right, so we're talking about the strategic impact. How does this new mobile system really complicate things for India's potential adversaries, especially given the two-front challenge? Let's start with Pakistan.
Well, for Pakistan, the sources suggest this creates what they call an insurmountable targeting problem. That 1,000 to 2,000 kilometer range on the Agni Prime puts pretty much all major Pakistani cities and military centers within reach, even if the missiles launched from way back deep inside India, far from the border and conventional attack range. They simply can't realistically hope to preemptively destroy these launchers without a massive, potentially nuclear escalation themselves.
Okay, and then looking north towards China, how does Agni Prime on rails change that dynamic?
So against China, it adds a really critical layer. Obviously, the longer-range Agni V is the main strategic deterrent aimed deeper into China. But the Agni Prime RBML provides a highly survivable weapon system focused squarely on China's Western theater. It can hold key military infrastructure, airfields, logistics hubs in regions like Tibet and Xinjiang at risk from these mobile, hard-to-find platforms.
So it forces the PLA, the Chinese military, to spread their attention and resources thin.
Exactly that. They now have to dedicate significant ISR assets. Intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, things like satellites, drones, ground monitoring, just to try and keep track of these potential missile trains in the West. Those are valuable resources they'd probably prefer to use elsewhere, maybe monitoring the seas or other areas. It complicates their planning significantly.
And this leads to what some analysts are calling a strategic shell game, but on a massive continental scale.
Yeah, the shell game analogy works really well here. Think about it, 70,000 kilometers of track. That's like wrapping around the Earth almost twice. You have these missile launchers looking like regular trains, moving across this incredibly complex network using tunnels, bridges, sidings for concealment. An adversary wanting to guarantee they destroy them would have to somehow target every possible location simultaneously.
Which is not feasible.
Strategically and practically, no. The sheer number of warheads you'd need to blanket thousands of kilometers of railway, potential hiding spots, is prohibitive. The cost, the complexity it makes a disarming first strike look irrational, almost impossible to pull off successfully. And that uncertainty it creates, that's the bedrock of deterrence.
This also fits into India's broader strategy of having multiple layers of deterrence, doesn't it? You've got Agni Prime, rail, and potentially road mobile, shorter range, focused on survival, and then Agni V, road mobile, much longer range, MIRV capable.
That's the architecture, exactly. It's becoming quite sophisticated. Agni Prime shores up regional deterrence, guarantees survival against a regional first strike. Agni V, with its longer reach and multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, the MIRVs, provides the strategic punch, able to target major cities or hardened sites far away and potentially overwhelm defenses. Having both gives India much more flexibility in how it manages escalation in a crisis.
And developing this rail mobile tech puts India in a pretty exclusive club, globally speaking. Not many countries have gone down this route.
Very few, historically. The Soviet Union was really the pioneer here, fielding their SS-24 Scalpel missile trains back in the late Cold War. Today, there are reports that China has been testing a rail-mobile ICBM, maybe the DF-41, and North Korea has also shown off a basic rail launch capability. It tends to be something continental powers with specific land-based threats consider.
So why didn't everyone do this? Why did countries like the US, UK, France largely steer clear, sticking with submarines?
Well, there are significant downsides. It's incredibly expensive and logistically very complex to build, maintain, and secure these systems. And while the network is vast, it's still a fixed network. Choke points like major bridges, tunnels, key junctions, these can be targeted, potentially trapping the middle trains.
And I imagine moving nuclear missiles around on civilian rail lines. That's a tough sell politically in many places.
Absolutely. In open democracies, the public safety concerns, the potential for accidents, local opposition, the not my backyard factor, these are huge political hurdles. For the big maritime powers, ultimately, the SSBN, the ballistic missile submarine, just offers far superior stealth and survivability. A sub can disappear for months underwater. It's vastly harder to track than a train, however disguised. So the RBML is really India's unique land-based answer to achieve that kind of survivability, tailored to its own geography and strategic needs.
And it's important to stress for you listening that this RBML system is highlighted as a completely indigenous effort, part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat or Self-Reliant India initiative.
Yes, and that self-reliance piece is crucial. It demonstrates India's maturity as a nuclear power, able to design and build complex strategic systems domestically. It reduces reliance on foreign tech, enhances strategic autonomy, allowing India to pursue its security goals without external pressures or constraints.
Okay, so we've got this major technological achievement, enhancing survivability. But if we connect this back to grand strategy, there's this concept it seems to interact with the stability-instability paradox. How does the RBML play into that?
Ah, yes. This is where things get counterintuitive, maybe even a bit worrying. The paradox suggests that when nuclear deterrence becomes very stable, when both sides are absolutely confident they can retaliate, making a nuclear first strike unthinkable, they might actually feel safer taking risks at lower levels of conflict.
So because the ultimate catastrophe, nuclear war, seems off the table thanks to systems like the RBML guaranteeing retaliation.
Exactly. Because that ultimate catastrophe feels less likely, leaders might feel more insulated from the ultimate consequences. This could, paradoxically, lower the threshold for conventional fighting or subconventional clashes, say along the line of control with Pakistan or the line of actual control with China. The nuclear safety net might inadvertently encourage more risk-taking below the nuclear level.
Wow. Okay. So to wrap up then, the Rail Mobile Agni Prime really represents the new iron spine, as the outline called it, for India's land-based nuclear deterrent. It makes that no first use policy much more robust, much more credible, and definitely forces a strategic rethink for potential adversaries. 70,000 kilometers of railway line just became a moving fortress.
That's a good way to put it. It certainly makes nuclear war less likely by guaranteeing retaliation. But it leaves us with a profound, lingering question tying back to that paradox. If this newfound strategic stability makes leaders feel freer to engage in conventional conflicts, does adding this highly survivable deterrent ultimately lead to more instability and fighting along the borders? That's the complex strategic puzzle this technology leaves us mulling over.